Commander Vex-9 stared at the surveillance footage for the 47th time today, and it still made absolutely no sense. The human subject designation Terra Prime Alpha had just vanished. Not teleported, not disintegrated, not even properly died. Just gone. Like someone had hit the delete key on reality itself. "Sir," Lieutenant Crix approached cautiously, his tentacles twitching with nervous energy. "The Science Division is requesting another briefing." Vex-9 turned his 6 eyes toward the younger officer, 2 of them rolling independently.
"Oh, wonderful.
"Let me guess. Dr. Thane has another brilliant theory about human biology that completely contradicts everything we learned from the last 3 expeditions." "Actually, sir," Crix's voice dropped to a whisper. "She wants to try cloning one." The silence that followed was so profound that even the ship's ventilation system seemed to hold its breath. Vex-9's primary mandibles clicked together slowly, a sound that every crew member had learned meant someone was about to receive a very unpleasant assignment. "She wants to what now?" "Clone a human, sir. Dr. Thane believes that by creating a genetic duplicate, we can study their cellular structure without the complications that arise from capturing live specimens." Vex-9 laughed. Not the pleasant, musical laughter of his species, but a harsh, mechanical sound that made nearby equipment rattle. "Complication."
"Yes,
"Lieutenant, that's certainly one way to describe the complete annihilation of Research Station Omega-7 and the mysterious disappearance of Captain Zool's entire strike force. 3 months ago, the Galactic Confederation had encountered these strange bipedal creatures called humans during a routine expansion survey. Initial observations suggested they were a primitive species, barely capable of interstellar travel with fragile bodies and laughably short lifespans. Perfect candidates for either slavery or elimination. How magnificently wrong they had been. The first attempt at contact had resulted in the humans somehow convincing Ambassador Califor to defect to their side. Not through torture or mind control, but through something they called poker night, and what appeared to be ritualistic consumption of fermented plant matter. The second attempt involved a standard military operation. 12 ships, each capable of reducing a planet to cosmic dust, had surrounded a single human vessel. The humans had responded by broadcasting what they claimed was a mixtape and proceeding to disable all 12 ships using nothing but spare parts, duct tape, and what their leader cheerfully described as aggressive creativity. The third attempt had been the research station incident. Scientists had managed to capture a single human specimen for study. Within 48 hours, the human had not only escaped, but had somehow convinced half the research staff to help him build an improved hyperdrive engine, while teaching the other half something called Earth cuisine. The station's destruction had been an accident involving what the human termed a slight miscalculation with the space-time continuum. Now Dr. Thane wanted to clone one. "Sir?" Crix's voice interrupted Vex-9's increasingly dark thoughts. "Should I tell Dr. Thane that her request has been approved?" "Approved? Did I say approved?" Vex-9's remaining eyes focused on the lieutenant with predatory intensity. "When exactly did I give the impression that creating an artificial human was anything resembling a good idea?" "Well, sir, you haven't actually said no." Vex-9 considered this. The Confederation's military doctrine clearly stated that understanding your enemy was paramount to victory. And they certainly didn't understand humans. Every encounter had left them more confused than before. The creatures appeared to operate on some form of logic that existed entirely outside the known laws of physics and common sense. "Fine," he said finally, "but this happens on Research Vessel Delta 9, not on my ship, and if anything goes wrong—" "Yes, sir. I'm feeding Dr. Thane to the waste recyclers. Personally." 2 days later, aboard Research Vessel Delta 9, Dr. Lydia Thane was having the time of her considerable scientific career. The human genetic sample, obtained from the remains of Research Station Omega-7, was absolutely fascinating. Unlike any other species in the galactic database, human DNA seemed to contain vast sequences that served no apparent purpose. What other species would call junk DNA, but which Thane suspected might be something far more interesting. "Begin recording," she announced to her laboratory. "Experimental log, Day 1. Subject designation, Clone Human Alpha. We are attempting to create a genetically identical copy of the human specimen designated Terra Prime Alpha, who was previously held at Research Station Omega-7. Her assistant, Dr. Marcus Pike, adjusted the cloning apparatus with practiced precision. Genetic material is stable, Doctor. All systems are functioning within normal parameters. Excellent. Initialize the growth sequence. The cloning chamber hummed to life, filled with a soft blue glow that was both soothing and slightly ominous. Inside, the genetic material began its transformation, guided by technology that had successfully created thousands of clones from hundreds of different species. What could possibly go wrong? Growth rate is accelerating beyond expected parameters, Pike reported, his voice carrying the first hint of concern. The cellular development is unusual. Thane leaned closer to the monitors. Define unusual. Well, typically we see linear development. Cell division follows predictable patterns, but this, Pike gestured at the readouts. The cells appear to be dividing in sequences that shouldn't be mathematically possible, and they are generating energy signatures that don't match anything in our database. Perhaps human biology is simply more complex than we initially calculated. Dr. Pike's voice had now moved well beyond concern into what could charitably be called barely controlled panic. The energy output just increased by 300%, and the temperature inside the chamber is rising despite the cooling systems operating at maximum capacity. Thane frowned at the displays. The readings were indeed anomalous, but science had always been about pushing boundaries. Continue the procedure. Take detailed recordings of any unusual phenomena. Are you absolutely certain that's wise? Dr. Pike, we are scientists. Caution is for engineers and accountants. This statement would later be recorded as evidence item alpha in the official investigation report filed under famous last words of people who really should have known better. The transformation continued throughout the night. By morning, something that resembled a human male had formed inside the chamber. It was approximately 6 feet tall with dark hair and features that matched the genetic template almost perfectly. All vital signs are strong, Pike reported, though his tentacles were still twitching with nervous energy. Brain activity is active, very active, possibly too active. Define too active. Well, most clones start with basic neural patterns, simple reflexes, basic motor functions. This clone's brain appears to be generating complex thought patterns immediately. It's as if it's thinking. All sentient beings think, Dr. Pike. Yes, but this is different. The neural patterns don't match any known species. They are creative, chaotic, and they are getting stronger. Dr. Thane studied the readings with growing excitement rather than concern. Fascinating. The human brain appears to begin complex cognitive processes immediately upon formation. This could revolutionize our understanding of consciousness itself. Doctor, perhaps we should consider terminating the experiment until we can analyze. Absolutely not. This is the discovery of a lifetime. Begin the awakening sequence. The awakening sequence? Doctor, I really don't think. Begin the sequence, Dr. Pike. That's an order. Pike's tentacles drooped with resignation as he initiated the awakening protocol. The chamber's blue glow shifted to green, and the figure inside began to stir. The clone's eyes opened. They were blue like the genetic template indicated they should be, but there was something behind those eyes that made Pike take an involuntary step backward. Intelligence, yes, but also something else. Something that seemed to be evaluating everything it saw with predatory calculation. The clone sat up slowly, examining its hands with what appeared to be scientific curiosity. Then it looked directly at the observation window where Thane and Pike were standing, and it smiled. "Hello there," the clone said, its voice carrying through the chamber's communication system. "I don't suppose either of you gentlemen would be willing to explain exactly where I am and why I appear to be naked in what looks like a very expensive fish tank." Dr. Thane nearly dropped her data pad. "It's speaking immediately. No learning period, no language acquisition phase. It just, no." "Doctor," Pike whispered urgently, "look at the energy readings." The displays showed power fluctuations throughout the ship. Lights flickered in corridors 3 decks away. The artificial gravity system hiccuped, causing everyone to experience a moment of weightlessness before snapping back to normal. Also, the clone continued conversationally, "I'm experiencing some rather interesting memories that I'm fairly certain aren't mine. Something about poker games and mixtapes." "Ring any bells?" Pike grabbed Thane's arm. "Doctor, we need to terminate this experiment. Now." "Are you insane? This is the breakthrough we have been searching for. The energy fluctuations are affecting ship-wide systems, And those aren't the original human's memories. Clones don't inherit memories. That's impossible. Excuse me, the clone interrupted politely. I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. Fascinating discussion about the impossibility of inherited memories. I do hope you will forgive me for pointing out that you gentlemen appear to have accidentally created something that shouldn't exist, according to your own scientific principles. The clone stood up, completely unbothered by its nudity, and walked to the chamber wall. When it placed its hand against the transparent aluminum barrier, the material began to resonate with a low, humming sound. Now I realize this might seem somewhat alarming, the clone continued, its tone remaining conversational despite the fact that the chamber wall was beginning to develop hairline cracks. But I'm finding myself in possession of some rather urgent knowledge about your species' plans for humanity, and I'm afraid I simply cannot allow that to continue. How is it doing that? Pike demanded, staring at the growing web of cracks. That barrier is designed to contain Class A energy beings. I have absolutely no idea, Thane replied, her scientific excitement finally being tempered by the dawning realization that perhaps they had made a slight error in judgment. The clone tilted its head, studying them with those unnervingly intelligent blue eyes. You know, it's quite remarkable. I can access memories from every human who has ever encountered your species. Every abduction, every experiment, every casual murder you have committed in the name of galactic expansion. Quite an impressive resume of atrocities, really. That's impossible, Thane protested. You are a clone of a single individual. You cannot possibly have access to the memories of other humans. Yes, that does seem to be the prevailing scientific opinion, the clone agreed pleasantly. Unfortunately for your hypothesis, you appear to have overlooked something rather crucial about human DNA. What? We are all connected. The chamber wall shattered. The clone stepped through the opening as alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Emergency lighting bathed everything in red, and automated voices announced containment breaches in multiple languages, none of which seemed adequate to describe what was actually happening. Now then, the clone said, brushing fragments of transparent aluminum from its shoulders. I don't suppose either of you happens to have some spare clothing. It's rather difficult to have a proper conversation while naked. Makes people focus on entirely the wrong things. Mike was frantically pressing emergency buttons that seemed to have no effect whatsoever. Security. We need security in Laboratory Section 7. Containment breach. Containment breach. Oh, I wouldn't bother with that, the clone advised helpfully. Your security systems appear to be experiencing some technical difficulties. Something to do with their electronics suddenly developing what you might call creative personalities of their own. To demonstrate this point, the laboratory's main door slid open and closed several times in what appeared to be a rhythmic pattern. Almost like it was keeping time to music that only it could hear. You see, the clone continued, examining the various pieces of equipment around the laboratory with obvious interest. When you decided to clone a human, you made a rather fundamental miscalculation. You assumed that consciousness was individual, that memories were stored in individual brains, that intelligence was a purely biological phenomenon. Dr. Thane found her voice. What are you saying? I'm saying that you accidentally tapped into something much larger than one person's DNA. Humans aren't just individuals, Doctor. We are part of a collective consciousness that spans across space and time. Every human who has ever lived, is living, or will live is connected through quantum entanglement at the cellular level. Pike laughed hysterically. That's impossible. Quantum entanglement doesn't work that way, doesn't it? The clone picked up a datapad and glanced at it casually. Within seconds, every screen in the laboratory began displaying human poetry, mathematical equations, and what appeared to be recipes for something called chocolate chip cookies. Your science is rather limited, isn't it? You understand the mechanics of the universe, but you have completely missed its soul. What do you want? Thane demanded. Want? Oh, I don't want anything for myself, the clone replied cheerfully, but I'm afraid I have some rather urgent business to attend to. You see, every human in the galaxy now knows exactly where you are, what you have been doing, and what you are planning to do next, and they are quite understandably upset about it. The ship shuddered. Through the laboratory's viewport, they could see lights appearing in the darkness of space. Lots of lights, moving fast. That would be the cavalry, the clone explained, noting their expressions. Humans have this remarkable ability to coordinate activities across vast distances without traditional communication systems, quite useful in situations like this. This is impossible, Pike whispered. How many ships could they possibly have? The clone walked to the viewport and gazed out at the approaching lights with what appeared to be fond pride. All of them, I should think. When you threaten one human, you threaten all humans. When you abduct one human, you declare war on all humans. And when you try to clone a human, the ship shuddered again, more violently this time. Well, that's when things get really interesting. Dr. Thane stared at the approaching fleet with growing horror. How many ships are out there? Oh, I'd estimate roughly 12,000, the clone replied casually, give or take a few hundred. Humans are remarkably efficient when properly motivated. 12,000 ships. That's impossible. Intelligence reports indicated that humans barely have functional space travel. Yes, your intelligence reports. The clone chuckled. Based on observing humans who were pretending to be primitive in order to lure you into exactly this sort of situation. Quite clever, really. Sun Tzu would be proud. Who? Never mind. The point is, you have been magnificently played. Every encounter you have had with humans has been carefully orchestrated to make you underestimate them. The escaped prisoner? Planned. The defecting ambassador? Planned. The research station incident? Well, that one was partially improvised, but the general outcome was anticipated. The main communication system crackled to life. A human voice speaking in perfect galactic standard filled the laboratory. Attention research vessel Delta 9. This is Admiral Sarah Vance of the Terran Defense Fleet. You are ordered to surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded. Dr. Thane activated the response system with shaking tentacles. This is Dr. Lydia Thane, senior researcher aboard Delta 9. We are conducting legitimate scientific research under the authority of the Galactic Confederation. Dr. Thane, Admiral Vance's voice was pleasant, but carried an unmistakable edge of steel. You have unlawfully abducted human citizens, conducted illegal genetic experiments, and attempted to create unauthorized clones of human beings. These actions constitute acts of war against the Terran Republic. Terran Republic? Pike whispered. Intelligence never mentioned any Terran Republic. That's because the Terran Republic didn't exist until about 6 hours ago, the clone explained helpfully. Humans have this remarkable ability to form governments, military alliances, and industrial complexes with impressive speed when the situation demands it. Right now, every human colony, station, and ship in known space is operating under unified command. Quite an achievement considering they managed it in less time than it takes most species to file the appropriate paperwork. The communication system crackled again. Dr. Thane, you have 30 seconds to respond before we begin boarding procedures. I should mention that our boarding procedures tend to be somewhat energetic. Thane looked desperately at the clone. What do you want? What will it take to make this stop? Oh, it's far too late to stop this, the clone replied, but I might be able to negotiate more favorable surrender terms. Humans can be quite reasonable when they are not being abducted and experimented upon. 15 seconds, Dr. Thane. Please, Thane begged. We will release all human prisoners. We will cease all research. We will withdraw from human space. I'm afraid it's not quite that simple, the clone said thoughtfully. You see, humans have this peculiar moral code that extends beyond just protecting themselves. They tend to get rather upset about injustice in general, and your species has been committing quite a lot of injustice throughout the galaxy. What does that mean? It means, Dr. Thane, that you are not just dealing with humanity's response to your crimes against humans. You are dealing with humanity's response to your crimes against everyone. The ship shook violently as magnetic grapples attached to the hull. Through the laboratory's speakers they could hear the distinctive sound of cutting tools beginning to work on the outer airlock. Time's up, Dr. Thane, Admiral Vance announced. Boarding in progress. All crew members are advised to remain calm and comply with all instructions from boarding teams. Resistance will be met with appropriate force. Appropriate force? Mike asked weakly. Humans have a rather flexible definition of appropriate, the clone explained. It usually involves whatever level of force is necessary to achieve their objectives, plus about 20% extra just to make sure everyone understands they are serious. The lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in that eerie red glow that made even the most innocent laboratory equipment look somehow sinister. Through the walls, they could hear the sounds of rapid movement, shouted orders, and what sounded like someone playing music at high volume. "Is that jazz?" Pike asked incredulously. "Humans like to work to music," the clone explained. "Helps maintain morale during unpleasant tasks. I believe that particular piece is called Take the A-Train. Quite appropriate for a boarding action, actually." The laboratory door slid open with a pneumatic hiss. 3 figures in advanced combat armor entered, their weapons trained on the room's occupants. The armor was sleek, black, and covered with sensors that gave them an almost insectoid appearance, but it was clearly hidden technology, far more advanced than anything in the Confederation database. "Secure," the lead figure announced, their voice electronically modulated. 2 researchers, one a naked human male. "That would be me," the clone said cheerfully. "Clone designation Alpha. At your service. Any chance one of you has some spare clothing? This has been a rather eventful day, and I'd prefer to continue it with some basic dignity intact." One of the soldiers detached something from their belt and tossed it to the clone. It unfolded into a simple jumpsuit that fit perfectly. "Thank you," the clone said, pulling on the garment with obvious relief. "Much better. Now then, shall we proceed to the briefing?" "Briefing?" Thane asked weakly. "Oh yes, there's quite a lot to discuss. Military strategy, diplomatic protocols, the future of galactic civilization, that sort of thing." The clone turned to the soldiers. "I assume Admiral Vance is aboard." "Yes, sir. She's waiting in the main conference room." "Excellent. Doctors, if you would be so kind as to accompany us. I promise the conversation will be enlightening." As they were escorted through the ship's corridors, Thane couldn't help but notice that human personnel were everywhere. They moved with military precision, but without the rigid formality she expected from a conquering force. Many of them nodded politely as the group passed, and several offered what appeared to be snacks to the ship's original crew members. "How did they take the ship so quickly?" she asked. "Oh, they didn't take it," the clone replied. "They are just borrowing it. Humans are very big on the concept of property rights. They will return it when they are finished, probably in better condition than they found it. Humans are excellent engineers." They arrived at the main conference room to find a woman in her 50s wearing Admiral's insignia and an expression of polite interest. She was reviewing data on a tablet while occasionally sipping what appeared to be coffee from a mug that read "Galaxy's Greatest Mom." "Admiral Vance," the clone said, offering a slight bow. "Thank you for responding so quickly." "My pleasure," Admiral Vance replied, setting down her mug. "Though I have to say this is the first time I have been summoned to a diplomatic meeting by a clone of unknown origin. That's a new one. Even for us." "Yes, I imagine it would be. I'm afraid my existence represents something of a paradigm shift in how cloning technology interacts with human consciousness. So, I gather our xenobiologists are very excited to study your situation, assuming you are willing to participate in some non-invasive research. I'd be delighted. But first, perhaps we should address the matter of galactic politics." Admiral Vance gestured for everyone to take seats around the conference table. "Yes. Let's doctors. Thane and Pike, you are here as representatives of the Galactic Confederation's Military Research Division. I'm here as the commanding officer of humanity's response to your species' ongoing campaign of abduction, experimentation, and genocide against human civilians." "Genocide?" Pike protested. "We have never engaged in genocide." "Haven't you?" The clone pulled up a holographic display that showed star charts marked with various symbols. "Let's see. 17 human colonies destroyed in what you classified as pest control operations. 437 human ships captured or destroyed while conducting legitimate trade missions. Over 12,000 human civilians abducted for scientific research, fewer than 3% of whom were ever returned alive." The room fell silent except for the gentle humming of the ship's life support systems. "Those were lawful military operations," Thane said weakly, "authorized by the Confederation Council under the Expansion Protocol." "Yes, I'm sure they were," Admiral Vance replied pleasantly, "just as I'm sure the Confederation Council will find our response to be perfectly reasonable under the circumstances." "What response?" "Well, let's see." Admiral Vance consulted her tablet. "As of 6 hours ago, human forces have neutralized the Confederation's staging areas in the Regil, Vega, and Proxima systems. Confederation civilian shipping has been embargoed throughout human space, and formal declarations of war have been delivered to all Confederation member species. All of them? Pike squeaked. All of them. Humans are very thorough about paperwork. We have also filed formal complaints with the Galactic Trade Commission, the Interspecies Council for Peace, and the Universal Court of Justice. But the Confederation is the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Was, the clone corrected gently. Past tense? I'm afraid your intelligence about human capabilities was somewhat outdated. Admiral Vance nodded. The thing is, doctors, your species made a fundamental error in judgment. You assumed that because humans appeared to be primitive, they actually were primitive. What you failed to consider is that humans are extremely good at appearing to be something they are not. Deception is one of our greatest evolutionary advantages. The clone added. We have had millions of years to perfect it. Camouflage, misdirection, strategic deception. We are so good at it that we often deceive ourselves. So when your forces encountered human ships that seemed barely capable of space travel, Admiral Vance continued, what you were actually seeing was human ships that were deliberately designed to look barely capable of space travel, while our actual military vessels remained carefully hidden until we decided it was time to reveal them, the clone finished. Dane stared at the star charts showing the destroyed Confederation bases. How many ships do you actually have? That's classified, Admiral Vance replied cheerfully, but I can tell you that our current mobilized fleet represents approximately 15% of our total military capacity. 15% defeated the entire Confederation forward fleet? Oh, we didn't defeat them, the clone said. We convinced them to surrender, much more efficient. Most of them are now serving in the Terran Defense Fleet under human command. Turns out quite a few Confederation species were getting rather tired of the Confederation's expansionist policies. Admiral Vance leaned back in her chair. Which brings us to the main point of this meeting. The Galactic Confederation, as it currently exists, is finished. The question now is what comes next. What do you mean, Thane asked? I mean, doctors, that humanity is not interested in conquest. We are interested in justice, and that means restructuring galactic civilization to prevent the sort of systematic oppression your Confederation has been practicing for the last several centuries. You can't just reorganize the galaxy. Can't we? The clone smiled. Doctor, you created me using human genetic material. In doing so, you accidentally connected yourselves directly to the collective consciousness of humanity. Every human in the galaxy now knows everything your species knows. Every star chart, every tactical plan, every secret research project, every hidden base. Not just knowledge, Admiral Vance added. Emotions. Humans now understand exactly how your species feels about the civilizations you have conquered. The contempt, the casual cruelty, the complete indifference to suffering. It's been quite educational. What do you want from us? Pike asked desperately. Cooperation. Admiral Vance replied simply, your species has advanced medical technology, sophisticated research capabilities, and extensive knowledge of galactic politics. Humanity needs those resources to rebuild the civilizations your Confederation destroyed. And if we refuse, then you will be tried for war crimes in the courts we are establishing on the former Confederation capital worlds, the clone said matter-of-factly. Humans are very big on legal proceedings, due process, fair trials, proper representation. Very civilized. The penalty for genocide is typically life imprisonment on a penal colony, Admiral Vance added. Though with proper cooperation we might be able to arrange something more constructive. The ship's communications system chimed politely. Admiral Vance, this is Commander Torres aboard the flagship. We have received surrender notifications from the Confederation 4th and 7th Fleets. Total enemy casualties are minimal, and most captured personnel are requesting asylum in the new Terran Republic. Excellent news, Commander. Any word from the diplomatic teams? Yes, ma'am. The former Confederation member species are responding positively to our proposals for the Galactic Democratic Alliance. Early estimates suggest we will have full membership approval within the week. Outstanding. Inform the Council that we should be ready to begin transition protocols ahead of schedule. Yes, ma'am. Also, the clone designated Alpha has been formally recognized as a Terran Republic citizen with full diplomatic immunity. The paperwork came through about an hour ago. The clone looked pleased. How efficient. I was wondering about my legal status. Admiral Vance turned back to the two doctors. So, doctors, what will it be? Cooperation with the new galactic government or war crimes trials? And Thane and Pike exchanged glances. Around them the ship hummed with the efficient activity of human personnel who seemed to be simultaneously conducting military operations, scientific research, and what appeared to be a ship-wide cooking competition. If we cooperate, Thane said slowly, what exactly would that involve? Full disclosure of all Confederation research projects. Admiral Vance replied. Assistance in developing medical treatments for the survivors of Confederation experiments. Help in locating and liberating the remaining prison colonies. And of course testimony in the war crimes trials of your former colleagues who choose not to cooperate. That's extensive. War crimes generally are, the clone observed. But humans are quite forgiving of people who genuinely want to make amends. Look at it this way, you will be helping to build a better galaxy. Plus, Admiral Vance added with a slight smile, the research opportunities will be unprecedented. Humans are planning to share all of our advanced technology with our allies. Imagine what you could accomplish with access to our medical databases, our engineering specifications, our scientific methods. Thane felt her scientific curiosity overriding her political concerns. What kind of advanced technology? Well, let's see. The clone consulted his own datapad. Faster-than-light communication, temporal mechanics, dimensional engineering, consciousness transfer, genetic modification, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology. Oh, and proper coffee brewing techniques. Humans are very particular about their coffee. Temporal mechanics? Pike gasped. That's impossible. So was cloning a human and accidentally creating a living link to humanity's collective consciousness, Admiral Vance pointed out. Yet here we are. Dr. Thane looked around the conference room, taking in the casual efficiency of the human personnel, the advanced technology that seemed to operate as much on intuition as on science, and the clone who sat calmly explaining the reorganization of galactic civilization as if he were discussing the weather. Very well, she said finally. We will cooperate. Excellent. Admiral Vance clapped her hands together. I knew you'd make the right choice. Humans are excellent judges of character. What happens now? Pike asked. Now, Dr. Pike, you help us rebuild the galaxy, the clone replied, and with any luck we will all live long enough to see what humanity can accomplish when we are not busy defending ourselves against genocidal aliens. Speaking of which, Admiral Vance added, we should probably get started. There are approximately 3,000 former Confederation prison colonies that need liberating, several 100 million refugees who need medical attention, and at least 47 species that need to be taught the basics of democratic government. Plus, the clone said with obvious enthusiasm, I'm quite curious to study how my own existence might change our understanding of consciousness, identity, and the nature of human connection. This should be a very interesting few decades. Through the conference room's viewport, the lights of 12,000 human ships stretched out into the darkness of space like a constellation of stars, each one carrying the hopes and dreams of a species that had just announced its intention to remake the galaxy according to principles of justice, equality, and the fundamental belief that all sentient beings had the right to live free from fear. Dr. Thane watched those lights and realized that for the first time in her career she was about to be part of something genuinely worthwhile. She just hoped they all survived it. 3 weeks later, Dr. Thane was beginning to suspect that cooperating with humanity might have been the most terrifying decision of her professional career. Not because the humans were cruel or vindictive, which would have been understandable given the circumstances. No, the truly horrifying part was how enthusiastically competent they were at absolutely everything. Dr. Thane, called Lieutenant Maya Santos, the human liaison assigned to oversee the transition of research vessel Delta 9. We have got the new medical bay operational, and the rehabilitation center is ahead of schedule. Want to see the progress report? Thane accepted the datapad with tentacles that had developed a permanent nervous twitch. The reports were, as always, impossibly optimistic and thoroughly documented. In 3 weeks, the humans had converted a military research vessel into a state-of-the-art humanitarian relief ship, trained her entire crew in new medical procedures, and somehow managed to improve the ship's engine efficiency by 40%. Lieutenant Santos, Thane said carefully, When you say the rehabilitation center is ahead of schedule, exactly how far ahead are we talking? Oh, about 6 months, Santos replied cheerfully. Turns out your species' medical technology combines really well with our psychological treatment methods. We are getting fantastic results with the former prisoners. This was another thing that made Thane's organs clench with anxiety. The humans had insisted on treating the survivors of Confederation experiments not as test subjects or damaged goods, but as patients deserving of the best possible care. The results had been unsettling. Former prisoners who had been barely functional when the humans arrived were now not only healthy but actively participating in the reconstruction efforts. Many had requested to join the new Galactic Democratic Alliance as permanent citizens. Several had asked to serve on human ships. How many former prisoners have we successfully treated? Thane asked, dreading the answer. Well, let's see. Santos consulted her own datapad. On this ship alone we have processed 437 individuals from 17 different species. Success rate is running about 94%, which is actually lower than our target goal, but we think we can improve that with some adjustments to the neural reconstruction protocols. 94%? Thane's voice cracked slightly. The Confederation Medical Division considered a 20% survival rate to be acceptable. Yeah, we noticed that in your records, Santos said, her tone becoming notably cooler. We have been having some very interesting discussions about Confederation medical ethics with the war crimes tribunals. Thane wisely decided not to pursue that particular line of conversation. They were interrupted by the ship's communication system, which had been upgraded with human technology and now possessed what could only be described as a cheerful personality. Attention Delta 9 personnel. The ship announced in a voice that somehow managed to convey both authority and the sort of enthusiasm typically reserved for birthday parties. We are approaching the former Confederation prison colony, designated Omega. All rehabilitation teams please report to stations. And remember, today's lunch special is something called fish and chips, which the humans assure me is much better than it sounds. The ship talks now, Thane observed. Oh yeah, all our AIs are fully conversational, Santos explained. Turns out artificial intelligence works much better when you treat it like actual intelligence instead of just a sophisticated computer program. Through the viewport, Thane could see their destination, a barren planetoid that had served as one of the Confederation's most secure detention facilities. It had been designed to hold the most dangerous criminals and political prisoners in Confederation space, individuals so threatening that they required permanent isolation from civilized society. What she saw now made her question everything she thought she knew about prison administration. The planetoid's surface was covered with construction activity. Massive dome structures were rising from the barren landscape, connected by enclosed walkways and what appeared to be recreational facilities. Ships moved in carefully coordinated patterns, delivering supplies and personnel with the sort of efficiency that suggested military precision combined with civilian enthusiasm. How many prisoners were held on Omega 7? Santos asked, reviewing her briefing materials. Approximately 12,000, Thane replied. Most of them serving life sentences for crimes against the Confederation state. And how many of those crimes involved things like advocating for democratic government, refusing to surrender territorial rights, or teaching prohibited scientific methods? Thane's silence was answer enough. Right, Santos continued. While the good news is that most of them are going to be just fine. The colony is being converted into a major industrial and research center for the new alliance. Turns out a lot of your dangerous criminals were actually brilliant scientists, engineers, and political leaders. That's good? Very good. We are expecting Omega 7 to become one of the Alliance's primary technological development centers within the next 2 years. The ship's communication system chimed again. Incoming transmission from the surface. Admiral Vance is requesting a conference with Dr. Thane and the senior staff. Patch it through to the main screen, Santos instructed. The viewport shimmered and was replaced with an image of Admiral Vance standing in what appeared to be a vast underground facility, filled with sophisticated equipment and hundreds of beings from dozens of different species, all working together with obvious purpose and enthusiasm. Dr. Thane, Admiral Vance called out. Perfect timing. I wanted to show you what your former prisoners have been up to. The view shifted to show a massive construction project. Beings that Thane recognized as former inmates were working alongside human engineers to assemble something that looked like a cross between a particle accelerator and a musical instrument. "What is that?" Thane asked. "Oh, this is fascinating." Admiral Vance's voice carried the excitement of someone witnessing something genuinely remarkable. "It turns out that when you put 24 brilliant scientists from different species in the same room and give them unlimited resources, they start building things that shouldn't be possible according to conventional physics." One of the former prisoners, a member of the Kethis species that Thane recognized as Dr. Zilak Prime, approached the viewer. His previous medical records indicated severe psychological trauma and complete social withdrawal. Now he appeared animated and healthy, practically vibrating with scientific enthusiasm. "Dr. Thane," Dr. Zilak Prime called out in excellent galactic standard, "you must see this. We are constructing a dimensional resonance engine that will allow instantaneous communication across galactic distances. The humans provided the theoretical framework, but the engineering solutions require expertise from multiple species working in cooperation." "Dimensional resonance?" Thane gasped. "That's completely theoretical." "Not anymore." Dr. Zilak Prime laughed, a sound she had never heard from his species. "Human theoretical physics is approximately 300 years ahead of anything in the Confederation database. Combined with Keth mathematical analysis and Vorthak engineering principles, we can build technologies that seemed impossible just months ago." Admiral Vance reappeared on the screen. "The best part is, everything they are developing will be shared freely among all Alliance member species. No patents, no trade restrictions, no military classifications, just pure scientific advancement for the benefit of everyone." "How is that economically sustainable?" Thane asked. "Well, it turns out that when everyone has access to the same advanced technology, overall productivity increases exponentially," Admiral Vance explained. "Plus, humans have this philosophical concept called post-scarcity economics that makes traditional resource competition sort of irrelevant." "Post-scarcity economics?" "Basically when you can manufacture anything you need from raw atomic matter and have virtually unlimited energy sources, the traditional rules of supply and demand stop applying," Santos explained helpfully. "Humans figured out the basics about 50 years ago but kept it secret until they could ensure it wouldn't be weaponized by hostile civilizations." "You have had post-scarcity technology for 50 years and didn't use it." Thane's voice rose to what could charitably be called a controlled shriek. "Of course not," Admiral Vance replied. "We were sharing a galaxy with civilizations that routinely committed genocide for entertainment and enslaved entire species for manual labor. Did you really think we'd give you the technology to build unlimited weapons and armies?" The logic was so obvious that Thane felt slightly embarrassed for not understanding it immediately. "But now," she asked, "now we are rebuilding galactic civilization according to principles that make such weapons unnecessary." Admiral Vance said, "The Alliance Charter specifically prohibits the use of advanced technology for oppression or conquest. Any species that violates those principles loses access to the technological sharing network. And if they refuse to accept those limitations, then they are welcome to continue living according to pre-Alliance technological standards," Santos said with a shrug. "Funny how quickly most civilizations decide that cooperation is preferable to isolation." The screen switched to show another part of the facility, where Thane could see what appeared to be a massive cultural center. Beings from dozens of species were engaged in various activities that seemed to involve art, music, and what humans called recreational learning. "This is perhaps the most important part of the project," Admiral Vance continued. "We are not just rebuilding technology and government, we are rebuilding civilization itself. Teaching species to interact as equals rather than as conquerors and conquered." "How do you teach something like that?" Thane asked. "Very carefully," admitted Santos, "and with a lot of patience. Turns out that most species are naturally cooperative when they are not struggling for survival or defending against aggressive neighbors." A new voice joined the conversation. The clone, who had become something of a galactic celebrity in recent weeks, appeared on screen wearing what appeared to be a mixture of formal diplomatic attire and laboratory equipment. "Ah, Dr. Thane," the clone called out. "Excellent timing. I was hoping to discuss some fascinating developments in our consciousness research." "Developments?" "Yes. It appears that creating me has had some unexpected side effects. Nothing dangerous," he added quickly. Noting her expression, but quite remarkable from a scientific perspective. What kind of side effects? Well, it seems that my connection to human collective consciousness has created a sort of bridge between human awareness and the awareness of other species. Several of the former prisoners report experiencing what they describe as human empathy for the first time in their lives. That sounds transformative, the clone finished. Yes, quite. We are documenting cases of former Confederation soldiers who are experiencing genuine remorse for their actions, not because they have been punished or threatened, but because they are suddenly able to understand the emotional impact of their behavior on their victims. Admiral Vance nodded. It's been useful for the reconciliation processes. Hard to maintain hatred for someone when you can literally feel their perspective. But the truly interesting development, the clone continued enthusiastically, is that this empathic connection appears to be spreading. We are seeing similar effects in beings who haven't had direct contact with me but who have spent significant time working alongside humans. Spreading how? We think it might be a quantum entanglement effect, similar to what connects human consciousness, but extending to other species through prolonged cooperative interaction, Santos explained. The theoretical implications are staggering. What kind of implications? Well, the clone said thoughtfully, imagine a galactic civilization where every individual can literally understand the perspectives and experiences of every other individual, where hatred and prejudice become impossible because you can feel exactly how they affect their targets, where cooperation becomes the natural state because everyone understands how their actions impact the collective well-being. Thane felt her worldview shifting in ways that made her slightly nauseous. That would change everything. Yes, Admiral Vance agreed. It would. The question is whether the galaxy is ready for that kind of change. Based on current data, the clone reported, approximately 67% of Alliance member species are showing some degree of enhanced empathic capability. The rate of increase suggests we will reach universal coverage within the next 5 to 10 years. Universal coverage of what exactly? Universal empathy, Santos said simply. A galaxy where every sentient being can understand and feel the experiences of every other sentient being. The implications hit Thane like a physical blow. No more war based on misunderstanding. No more oppression justified by dehumanizing other species. No more suffering inflicted out of ignorance or indifference. This is what you planned, isn't it? She asked, looking directly at the clone. This is why you allowed yourselves to be cloned. The clone smiled. Not planned, exactly, but hoped for, certainly. Humans have always believed that most conflict stems from the inability to understand each other's perspectives. If we could solve that fundamental problem, you could solve all the other problems that follow from it, Thane finished. Precisely. Admiral Vance looked serious, for the first time in the conversation. Dr. Thane, I want you to understand something. What's happening here isn't conquest. It's not even revolution in the traditional sense. It's evolution. The galaxy is evolving into something better than what it was. And if some species resist that evolution, then they are welcome to remain at their current evolutionary level, the clone replied. But they won't be able to interfere with the evolution of others. The new empathic network makes aggressive behavior increasingly difficult to maintain. How so? Try to hurt someone when you can feel exactly how much pain you are causing them, Santos suggested. Most people find it impossible. The screen shifted again to show a panoramic view of the entire facility. Thousands of beings working together, learning together, building together. Former enemies collaborating on projects that would benefit species they had never encountered, children from dozens of different worlds playing games that incorporated elements from all their cultures. This is the future, Dr. Thane, Admiral Vance said quietly. Not just for humanity, but for everyone. A galaxy where cooperation is more rewarding than conflict, where diversity is celebrated rather than feared, where every individual has the opportunity to reach their full potential. How long do you think this will take? Thane asked. The technological transformation should be complete within the next decade, the clone reported. The social and cultural transformation will take longer, perhaps a generation or two. But we are already seeing remarkable progress, Santos added. Former Confederation member species are requesting admission to the Alliance at a rate of about 3 per week. Most of them are specifically asking for help in implementing democratic reforms and social justice programs. What about the species that were conquered by the Confederation? How are they adapting? Better than we expected, Admiral Vance replied. Turns out most oppressed populations are very enthusiastic about freedom, democracy, and the opportunity to participate in galactic civilization as equals rather than subjects. Plus, the clone added with obvious satisfaction, many of them have technologies and knowledge that were suppressed by the Confederation. We are learning as much from them as they are from us. Thane looked around the ship that had once been her research vessel and was now a humanitarian relief center. Human personnel worked alongside former Confederation scientists, former prisoners, and representatives from dozens of liberated species. Everyone seemed to share a sense of purpose that she had never encountered in her previous career. What happens to researchers like Dr. Pike and myself? She asked. People who participated in the Confederation's crimes but want to make amends. You keep doing research, Santos replied. Just research that helps people instead of hurting them. The galaxy needs scientists now more than ever. We are planning several major projects that could use your expertise, Admiral Vance added. Ecological restoration of damaged worlds, medical treatment for war survivors, development of new technologies that enhance rather than exploit biological systems. Plus, the clone said with a grin, there's the fascinating question of how my existence might change our understanding of consciousness, identity, and the nature of life itself. That should keep xenobiologists busy for decades. Speaking of which, Santos interrupted, we should probably head to the surface. The welcoming ceremony is scheduled to begin in about an hour. Welcoming ceremony? For the former prisoners. Now that they are officially free citizens of the Alliance, they wanted to hold a celebration. It's become quite a tradition. As their shuttle descended toward the surface of what had once been a prison world and was now becoming a center of learning and cooperation, Thane reflected on how completely her understanding of the universe had changed in just a few weeks. The Confederation had taught her that the galaxy was a dangerous place where only the strong survived, where different species were natural enemies, where peace was maintained through superior firepower and the willingness to use it. Everything she had been taught suggested that beings were fundamentally selfish, that cooperation was temporary at best, and that the only way to ensure your species' survival was to eliminate potential threats before they became actual threats. The humans had proved all of that wrong. Not through superior arguments or advanced philosophy, but through simple demonstration. They had shown that cooperation produced better results than competition, that diversity created strength rather than weakness, that treating other beings with respect and compassion was not only morally superior but practically more effective. The welcoming ceremony took place in a vast amphitheater that had been carved directly into the planetoid surface. Thousands of former prisoners, now free citizens, gathered to celebrate their liberation and the beginning of their new lives. Representatives from dozens of species stood together, many of them meeting for the first time as equals rather than as conquerors and conquered. Admiral Vance stepped up to address the crowd, her voice carrying clearly through the amphitheater's acoustics. Citizens of the Galactic Democratic Alliance, she began, we gather today not to celebrate victory but to celebrate the beginning of something much more important. We celebrate the first steps toward a galaxy where every being can live free from fear, where every species can contribute to the common good, where every individual has the opportunity to reach their full potential. The crowd responded with a sound that transcended species barriers. Applause, cheers, musical tones, and forms of approval that had no translation mixed together into something that could only be described as universal joy. The road ahead will not be easy, Admiral Vance continued. Building a truly just civilization requires patience, wisdom, and the willingness to learn from our mistakes. But look around you. Look at what we have already accomplished when beings of goodwill work together toward common goals. Thane looked around and saw former enemies embracing. Scientists from different species collaborating on projects that would have been impossible under the old system. Children playing games that incorporated traditions from across the galaxy. Some of you served the old Confederation, Admiral Vance said, her gaze finding Thane in the crowd. Some of you suffered under its oppression. Some of you fought against it. And some of you tried to reform it from within. Today, none of that matters. Today, we are all citizens of a new galaxy, with new opportunities and new responsibilities. The clone stepped forward to add his own remarks. As someone who exists because of both the failures and the possibilities of our current situation, he said, I want to remind everyone that we are literally creating the future with every choice we make. Every act of kindness, Every moment of cooperation, every instance of choosing understanding over prejudice helps to build the galaxy we want to live in. The connection that brought me into existence is spreading to all of you, he continued. Soon, the empathy that allows humans to work together will be available to every species in the Alliance. Imagine what we can accomplish when every being can truly understand every other being. The celebration continued long into the local night cycle. Music from dozens of worlds blended together into new forms that belonged to no single species but somehow spoke to all of them. Foods from across the galaxy were shared freely, creating combinations that delighted even the most experienced chefs. Stories were told that wove together the histories and mythologies of civilizations that had never imagined they could peacefully coexist. Late in the evening, Thane found herself in conversation with Dr. Zelak Prime and several other former prisoners who had become leading researchers in the new alliance. Dr. Thane, Dr. Zelak Prime said, "I wanted to thank you." "Thank me? For what?" "For making the choice to cooperate with the humans. Many of our former colleagues chose to resist the transition. They are now facing war crimes trials and will likely spend the rest of their lives in actual prisons. But you chose to help build something better." "I'm not sure I had much choice," Thane replied honestly. "The humans made it very clear what the alternatives were." "Oh, but you did have a choice," Dr. Zelak Prime insisted. "You could have chosen hatred, revenge, the desire to restore the old system. Many beings do when their worldview is challenged so completely. But you chose to learn, to adapt, to become part of the solution rather than remaining part of the problem." "It wasn't easy," Thane admitted. "Everything I thought I knew about the galaxy turned out to be wrong." "Not wrong," corrected Dr. Alan Seven, a former prisoner from the Vorthak system. "Incomplete. The Confederation showed us one way that civilizations could interact. The humans are showing us another way. A better way. The question now," added Dr. Marcus Kane, a human researcher who had joined their conversation, "is what we can build together that none of us could have built alone." As if summoned by their conversation, the clone appeared beside their group. In the weeks since his creation, he had become something between a diplomat, a philosopher, and a living symbol of the galaxy's potential for transformation. "Fascinating discussion," he observed, "but I think you are all missing the most important point." "Which is?" Dr. Zolik Prime asked. "This is just the beginning," the clone replied with obvious excitement. "What we are building here, this alliance, this new form of civilization, this expanded consciousness, it's not the end goal, it's the foundation for something even greater." "What could be greater than universal peace and cooperation?" Thane asked. The clone gestured toward the stars visible through the amphitheater's transparent dome. "Out there are billions of other galaxies, each with their own civilizations, their own challenges, their own opportunities. Once we have perfected cooperation within this galaxy, we can begin reaching out to them." "Intergalactic civilization," Dr. Ellen Seven gasped. "That's impossible," the clone suggested with a grin. "So was universal empathy. So was post-scarcity economics. So was peaceful coexistence between species that had been at war for centuries. Humans have a saying, today's impossibility is tomorrow's routine achievement. Besides," Dr. Kane added, "we have already detected several promising signals from neighboring galaxies. Some of them appear to be coming from civilizations that might be facing challenges similar to what we have just overcome."
You mean there might be other galaxies where peaceful species are being oppressed by military empires? Thane asked.
"Very likely," the clone confirmed. "And once we have demonstrated that there's a better way to organize galactic civilization, we will be in a position to help them make the same transition we are making now." The implications were staggering. Not just peace within their own galaxy, but the possibility of spreading that peace to the entire universe. Not just cooperation between the species they knew, but eventual contact with civilizations beyond their wildest imagination. "How long would something like that take?" Dr. Zelak Prime asked. "Centuries, probably," the clone admitted. "Maybe millennia. But time isn't really a limiting factor when you have access to the kind of technologies we are developing. And every generation will be starting from a higher foundation than the previous one. Plus," Dr. Kane added, "the empathic network effects seem to accelerate over time. As more beings become connected, the connection itself becomes stronger and more capable of integrating new participants." Admiral Vance joined their group, having finished her conversations with other dignitaries and celebration organizers. I couldn't help but overhear your discussion about intergalactic outreach, she said. I should mention that we have already begun preliminary research into the technologies that would be required for such projects. Already? Thane asked. Humans plan ahead. Admiral Vance replied with a smile. Way ahead. Some of our theoretical physicists have been working on intergalactic communication and transportation concepts for decades. They just needed a stable galactic civilization to serve as a launching platform. And now you have one, Dr. Ilan-7 observed. Now we all have one, Admiral Vance corrected. This isn't humanity's project, it's a collaborative effort by every species in the Alliance. The technologies we develop, the discoveries we make, the civilizations we contact, all of it will be shared equally among all participants. The clone nodded enthusiastically. That's perhaps the most important aspect of what we are building, not just the expansion of consciousness and cooperation, but the principle that progress belongs to everyone, not just to those who happen to discover it first. As the celebration continued around them, Thane realized that she was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history, not just the end of one form of civilization and the beginning of another, but the emergence of a completely new way of thinking about existence itself. For the first time in her life, she was part of something that was genuinely working to make the universe a better place for everyone in it. Not just her own species, not just the strong or the clever or the fortunate, but everyone. And the most remarkable part was that it was actually working. The former prison world buzzed with activity that would have been impossible under the old system. Research projects that combined the expertise of dozens of species, artistic collaborations that created beauty beyond anything any single culture could have imagined, children learning languages and customs and ways of thinking that would prepare them for a galaxy where diversity was celebrated rather than feared. Dr. Thane, the clone, said quietly, drawing her attention back to their conversation. I have a question for you. Yes. Are you happy? The question caught her completely off guard. In all her years as a scientist under the Confederation's system, happiness had never been a consideration. Success was measured in terms of research output, military advancement, and species superiority. Personal satisfaction was irrelevant. But looking around at the celebration, at the cooperation, at the genuine friendship developing between beings who had been enemies just weeks ago, she realized that she felt something she had never experienced before. Yes, she said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. Yes, I think I am. Good, the clone replied with obvious satisfaction. Because happiness, it turns out, is one of the most important indicators of a civilization's long-term stability. Happy beings create cooperative societies. Cooperative societies develop advanced technologies. Advanced technologies enable the exploration of new possibilities. And new possibilities lead to even greater happiness. A positive feedback loop, Dr. Kane observed. Exactly, and we are just getting started. Above them, the stars shone down on a galaxy in transition. A galaxy where former enemies were becoming friends, where former prisoners were becoming leaders, where former weapons of oppression were being transformed into tools of liberation. And in the distance, barely visible even to the most sophisticated sensors, other galaxies waited for their own transformations to begin. The story that had started with a failed cloning experiment had become the foundation for the greatest adventure in the history of consciousness itself. And everyone, human and alien, scientist and former prisoner, clone and original, was invited to participate. The future had never looked brighter.